Hi everyone, welcome to the NATEFit Mobility Series, which is comprised of 45-minute mobility sessions focused on improving joint function, range of motion, as well as improving the quality of our tissue. Today's session will be focused on internal rotation, which will be a combination of working the joint capsule, creating space in the joint, and then releasing and activating the tissue that's involved in internal rotation. The only piece of equipment you will need today is a lacrosse ball. We're going to use that to release the lateral tissue in our hip that's responsible for internal rotation. So for today's class, we're going to start off doing hip cars to warm up the tissue in our hip, and then we'll go to capsular cars, which will work a little bit more of the joint capsule. So for your hip cars, you can do them standing up. You can grab an object to hold on to while you do your cars, or what I like to do is use a wall. Just helps me keep a little bit more solid without compensating in the hips. So I'm going to do mine here. Grab a spot, and we're going to come up, pulling the knee into flexion, going out into abduction, internal rotation without moving my hips, hip extension, and coming back to our side or midline to abduction. Then we're going to reverse, going into hip extension, abduction, external rotation, flexion, back to our midline with adduction, and down. With these, we're going to do 5 reps. We're going to go nice and slow. Don't worry about getting too much range. We're just warming up the tissue. When we get to our capsular cars, we'll focus on getting a little bit more range and a little bit more control. So we'll start at 5 reps now. Coming up into flexion, abduction, internal rotation, extension, adduction. Reverse, extension, abduction, external rotation, flexion, adduction, and down. We're going to go a little quicker now and create a nice smooth motion throughout the range. Again, this is just a nice warm up, creating big circles with our knee. That's 2. 3, trying not to move our other hip. 4, and 1 more. 5. We'll go to the other side. You might find that one side is tighter than the other. That is quite common. Two, 3, 4, and 5. Okay, now we're going to go into our capsular cars. For capsular cars, we're going to do them lying down. It does help if you have an object to hold on to keep you in place. So I'm going to use a kettlebell. Anything you have will help. If you want to use your hands, you can use your hands to help keep you in place. But again, I find it much easier if you have an object. So for our capsular cars, they're going to be same as our cars, except now we have the floor, which is going to stop our hip from compensating. We're going to try and keep our hip in the exact same place. We're going to go super slow throughout the range of motion. And with this one, as we internally rotate, you'll feel this a lot more in the joint capsule. And we're going to try to work it a little bit, and then we'll work on creating space in the joint capsule. So we're going to start off here, coming up into flexion, abduction, away from the midline, internal rotation, nice and slow. Really focus on control there. Feel that in the joint capsule. We'll press back into extension. That's pressing the knee back and coming down to adduction. We're going to reverse, pressing the knee back into hip extension, abduction, fighting for as much range as you can, external rotation, nice and controlled, flexion, back down to the midline. We're going to reverse, flexion, abduction, internal rotation, nice, slow and controlled, hip extension, pressing the knee back, down to adduction. We're going to do 5 reps each direction, pressing back, hip extension, abduction, external rotation, nice and controlled, flexion, adduction. That's 2. Coming up into flexion. Reverse. Nice and slow. Fighting for as much range as we can get. While we're doing this, we should be gripping the ground or an object as hard as we can, creating as much tension in the body as possible. While we do this, we want our nervous system as active as possible, giving our brain as much information about each position as we can. Good. Excellent. We'll go to the other side. So, gripping nice and tight, activating that nervous system, pulling the knee up into flexion, fighting for as much range as we can without compensation. Again, compensation can be the hips rotating or moving. Extension, abduction, external rotation, flexion, and abduction. That's 3. Should notice that you're working quite hard during these, fighting for that range. have one more on this side. And reverse. Excellent. From that, you should notice that you have activated the tissue and you've worked it quite hard on the lateral side of our hips. That's the tissue, part of the tissue that's involved with internal rotation. Now we will begin our frog stretch, pails and rails. Pails and rails is essentially putting force into a stretch and against a stretch to give the brain more information about each position, allowing us to get more range. Now we will begin our frog stretch, pails and rails. Pails and rails stands for progressive and regressive angle isometric loading, where we'll be putting force in a static position or an isometric contraction into our stretch and against our stretch, activating the tissue as much as possible, sending a larger signal to the brain, allowing us to get more range. So we're going to go into our frog stretch. So with this one, you want your knees as wide as you can while feeling a stretch in the adductors. Don't force it. If you want to feel more of a stretch, you can press your hips back. We're going to gain more range as we do this, so don't worry about pushing back too far. So with our pails and rails, we're going to hold for 1 minute first, and that will allow us to get to our full passive range. So you can relax in this position while I explain what we're going to do. So with our pails, the angle that we're trying to improve is pushing our hips back. So we want to press our ankle into the ground for our pails, and for our rails, we're going to lift our ankle up. While we're doing this, you're focused on producing as much force as possible while staying in control. Again, we don't want to hurt ourselves during this, but the more force you produce, the bigger the signal you send to the brain, the more range your brain will give you because it has more information about those positions. With our pails, we're going to be doing 15 seconds pressing, rails 15 seconds pulling, and then we're going to relax for 15 seconds. In that 15-second relax, we're not going to lose position. We want to keep making forward progress. So while you're relaxed, we're just not pressing or pulling, but we're still trying to make progress in our stretch. So I'm going to count you down, and we're going to start our pails and rails. So again, pails, pressing the ankle into the floor. We're going to do this side first, then the other side. 3 reps per side. So starting with our pails, 3, 2, 1, pressing that ankle down or rotating it towards the ground. As you do this, you should notice that you can get quite a bit more range in that hip. When we go to our rails, you might have to move your hip forward a little bit, but we're going to try to keep it relatively in the same position. 3, 2, 1, lift. Lifting that ankle up as high as we can without moving our hips forward, activating this tissue. Pull up nice and hard. 3, 2, 1, relax. Setting it down, I'm pushing my hips back as I've been given more range. We have 15 seconds here, and then we're going to start our pails. 3, 2, 1, rotating that ankle into the floor as hard as you can. Focus on your breathing. And lift, high as you can. Again, trying not to move the hips. Getting as much activation in this lateral tissue as possible. 3, 2, 1, relax, set it down, push the hips back. We have one more set of pails and rails. 3, 2, 1, press hard as you can. Produce as much force into the ground with your ankle as possible. Feel those hips sink back. Getting as much activation as possible. 3, 2, 1, lift. Rotate, rotate, rotate. It's okay if your foot doesn't come up very high. 3, 2, 1, and relax. Before we switch sides, we're going to bring our knees together, nice and slow. You probably feel that in the capsule that you worked. We're just going to do nice little circles with our hips, getting some movement. And then I'm going to turn. We're going to switch sides. So hips wide. We want the angle of our femur and shin to be about 90 degrees. So we've already done our passive stretch. So we're just going to get in position and start our pails and rails from here. Going to give it 15 seconds. You can just work those hips a little bit while you wait. Okay, pushing the hips back, pressing down in 3, 2, 1, go. Pressing that ankle into the floor. This is our pails. As much force as you can press down with, giving the brain information about that position. 3, 2, 1, lift. Looking for that rotation in the femur. Pulling that ankle up. Reset. Think about lifting it as high as you can. And relax. Pressing the hips back. 15 seconds. We'll start our pails again. Three, 2, 1, press. Pressing the ankle into the ground as hard as we can. 3, 2, 1, lift. Internally rotating. Getting that ankle up as high as we can. Feeling the tissue here activate. 3, 2, 1, relax. And we'll slowly come out. Doing nice hip circles. To ease into that joint capsule. Okay, now we're going to roll out the lateral tissue in our hip. Again, you probably felt that when we were doing our frog stretch, pails and rails. That tissue is responsible or involved in internal rotation. We want to release it to allow it to activate more. We're going to take our lacrosse ball and we're going to stick it underneath the glute. We're going to put our leg up just to create some space in our glute or hip. And this could be quite painful for you. Anytime we have pain, it lets you know that your tissue is tight. The tighter the tissue is, the more unhealthy it is. So we want to release it. So as we roll, we're going to do this for 3 minutes. And as we roll, we want to relax into the ball. So the natural thing to do when you have pain is to tense up. I want you to take some deep breaths and try to slowly relax into the pain or into the ball. And so we're going to slowly work our way to the lateral side of the hip to get that tissue. Again, deep breaths. Put as much weight on your hands as you need. If you find a really painful spot, pause. Take a breath in. And long, slow exhale as you relax into the ball. Rolling will do nothing if we don't relax. So really focus on your breathing. Relax. Explore. Find the painful spots. half on this side, and then we'll switch sides. So there's no right place to roll. You're just exploring and finding the tight tissue. Do avoid rolling on the bone. We don't want to roll on a bone. That will compress our skin and our tissue and bruise us. I like to close my eyes during this just to allow me to concentrate on what I'm doing, find that tissue. Deep breath in, deep breath out, and relax into the ball. Another 10 seconds. Okay. Now we'll switch sides. Again, sticking the ball underneath the glute, pulling that leg up to create space. And start exploring. So after this, we're going to go back to our frog stretch, and we're going to do controlled lift-offs with our ankle. And you should notice a significant difference in the height that you'll get your ankle and the activation of the tissue. It won't feel as crampy when you lift your ankle off the ground. Really try to push those hips out and get the lateral tissue. Deep breaths. With every exhale, feel yourself relax into the ball. You'll find that that lateral tissue is a lot more painful. We want to get in there. One more minute. The slower you go, the easier it will be to relax. We don't want to roll quickly. We will tense up. Once we feel the pains, the quicker you go, the tenser you'll be. Okay. Now we're going to go back to our frog stretch position. And we're going to do controlled lift-offs. So creating about a 90-degree angle from the femur to the shin. Push the hips back. And we're going to do 10 controlled lift-offs. So lifting up, quick pause, down slow. Up, pause, down slow. Focusing on activating this tissue. 3, again, it doesn't matter how high you get as long as you're getting activation out of this tissue. 4, 5, looking for rotation of that femur. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Good. Other side. 1, 2, 3. Again, setting the foot down, not dropping it. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Good, we're going to bring the knees together. Do some hip circles. And now we're going to go into our 90-90 position. So with our 90-90 position, we want to create a nice 90-degree angle here and a nice 90-degree angle here. I like to put my hand here just for extra support. We're going to do our pails and rails from this position, very similar to our frog stretch. We're going to be pressing the ankle down for 15 seconds, pulling up for 15 seconds, and then relaxing back for 15 seconds. While we're doing this, we want to be at our end range. So you're going to push back as far as you can until you feel a good stretch in the capsule. If you don't feel a good stretch, we can rotate the shoulders. And I'm going to do that. So I'll come from this side. I'm going to slightly rotate the shoulders, and that will put a little bit more force into that ankle, and I should feel it right here. So again, we're going to be pressing down for our pails, pulling up for our rails, and then relaxing into it for another 15 seconds. When you do your rails and lifting up, we want to try to move the body as little as possible. To get a little bit of elevation, you might need to come forward a little bit. Okay, so we're going to start our pails and rails in 3, 2, 1. Pressing that ankle down as hard as you can. We're going to do 5 reps of this. Again, the more force you put into it, the better result you will get. 3, 2, 1, lift. Again, it doesn't matter how high you lift, we're just trying to get activation in this tissue. Pulling that ankle up as hard as you can, trying to keep that body upright. And relax. As we relax, we're going to pull our body back, and we're going to have a little bit more force in that ankle. We should feel it in the joint capsule itself. Pressing down in 3, 2, 1, press. Rotating that ankle into the ground. This takes a lot of concentration. Really focus on pressing that ankle down. 3, 2, 1, lift. Pulling that ankle up. Again, it doesn't matter how high you get it, as long as you're activating the tissue. Three, 2, 1, relax. Sitting back. Chest up nice and high. Again, if you don't feel it, you can rotate towards your foot. And press down. Pails, pressing that ankle down as hard as we can. This is rep number 3. Three, 2, 1, lift. Three, 2, 1, relax. Pulling those shoulders back, and again, if you want to feel it more, you can rotate towards your leg. I'm trying to make sure we're at 90 degrees. Starting our pails in 3, 2, 1, press. This is rep number 4. The more force you put into it, the better result you will get. And lift, rails. And relax. Keeping that chest high, rotate if you need to. We have one more rep of pails and rails. Pressing down in 3, 2, 1. And keeping that knee on the ground, but rotating that ankle down. 3, 2, 1, lift. And relax. And that's our 5 reps for this side. You can come out of it nice and slow. Again, it's quite hard on the joint capsule. Move your hip around if you need to. And we're going to switch sides. You might find that one side's significantly tighter than the other. We're going to start our pails in 3, 2, 1, press. Have that nice 90-90 position as we're pressing down. And lift. Three, 2, 1, relax back. Rotate your shoulders if you need to. Three, 2, 1, press. This is rep 2. Producing as much force as I can. 3, 2, 1, lift. Again, this takes a lot of focus and concentration. Get as much activation out of that tissue as you can. And relax. Being as upright as possible. Starting our pails in 3, 2, 1, press. This is rep 3. Three, 2, 1, lift. 3, 2, 1, relax. We got 2 reps left. 3, 2, 1, press. 3, 2, 1, lift. 1 more rep. 3, 2, 1, press. 3, 2, 1, lift. And relax. And that's our 5 reps of our 90-90s. You can move those hips back and forth just to work them a little bit. Now we're going to go back into our 90-90 position and we're going to do some hovers. So this is going to take our joint through a range of motion that we just worked. So we're going to start here. We're going to come up, in front, and back down. We're going to go really slow and controlled, and we're going to do 5 reps. So you can start with me in 3, 2, 1, pulling up, nice and slow, coming in front, and back. You can set it down. We're really focused on controlling this as much as possible. We're going to do 5 reps. It's 2. 3. 4. If your upper body moves a little bit, that's okay. Trying to keep the chest high though. And 5. Excellent. We're going to switch sides. The one hand is going to be your bracing hand. That's the same side as your leg in front. The other hand, I like to just put it on my knee so it can grab onto something, but it's also out of the way as I bring my foot around. Okay, starting our 5 reps, lifting up, pulling that knee up nice and high and rotating around in front and going back to internal rotation. 1. 2. 3. Controlling the full range. 4. 5. Excellent, that's our hovers. Next, we are going to go into our capsular cars again. So, if you had an object to help you, you can grab your object We're going to lay on the side. Again, a dumbbell, kettlebell, anything really suffices. If you don't have one, you can press on the ground with your hands. With our capsular cars, we're going to go really slow and focus on getting as much range as we can. As we went through this, we have increased the range of our hip internal rotation. So now we want to upload that information to the brain, and we're going to do that with our cars. So fighting for as much range as we can, we're going to do 3 reps per side. So coming up into flexion, abduction, internal rotation, going nice and slow, getting as much range as possible, extension, and down to our midline, reverse, extension, abduction, external rotation, nice and slow, pulling up into flexion, and back down to our midline. Again, flexion, abduction, really focus on this internal rotation. Again, we've improved our range and activation of our tissue, so go slow through this and use that range. Upload that information to your brain. That way we keep that range. That's 2. 1 more. Nice and slow through your internal rotation. And reverse. Good. And we're going to go to the other side. Starting in hip flexion. As much range as we can get. Abduction. Internal rotation, controlling it as much as possible. Extension and down. Reversing, extension, abduction, external rotation, flexion, back down to our midline. Flexion, abduction, nice and slow through our internal rotation, hip extension and down, reverse, fighting for that range, uploading that information, and the last one to finish off the session. Excellent. That is our mobility session for the day, focused on internal rotation. As we go through the mobility sessions, we're going to be focusing on other movements in the hip. Again, the point of internal rotation was to create more space in that hip and then work on releasing and activating the tissue so we can use that space. Thanks for joining, and we'll see you next time.